Hello and welcome to the Stitch Together podcast. My name is Chrissy and I am your host. I'm very sorry for the delay in between podcasts. If you have listened to my podcasts before it became a video podcast, you will be aware of my irregular episodes. It's because my health is poor and I never know if I'm going to be up to recording or not, because talking for any amount of time it's a physical effort for me. On the show notes, on the page with the show notes, it explains about me not being able to always do a regular podcast schedule. And obviously, if you found the podcast through YouTube and you've not visited the website where the show notes are located, you might not necessarily know that, and you might wonder, where has she gone? Well, I've not gone anywhere. It does mean that you sometimes might go 2, possibly even 3 weeks without an episode from me, and I hope you will be understanding of that. And don't worry if you don't hear from me for a few days or weeks longer than you were expecting. In this particular instance, it wasn't my usual health problems that stopped me from recording. It was a horrid cold. And not just my horrid cold, but also my partner's horrid cold, because that meant he was loitering around the house being sick, and his being sick means I didn't really want to disturb him with recording. And then when he was well enough to go back, that's when I came down with the same lurgy. So you'll have to excuse me if I have to take a drink or two while I'm talking, because my throat's still a little bit dry. But I really wanted to record and talk to you guys because I've missed you. And yeah, when I'm ill more than usual and cooped up in the house and not really feeling capable of communicating with the outside world, no matter the format, makes me sad. So being able to at least feel up to talking to you again is made me very happy. But it has meant that my project choices have been a little different from what they would normally be, because I just wasn't feeling up to doing anything that required too much thought, if you see what I mean. So that's where we're at. I don't know how much I've got to tell you or show you, but I just kind of wanted to get on and talk to you and about what's been going on, and just catch up basically. So I guess we shall start with stuff and things. In Stuff and Things this episode, I have the winners of the 2 giveaways I talked about. I think it was in episode 3. And I'm sorry you had to wait so long for the results of those giveaways, but I actually paid off with you guys, because you got an extra, I think probably week before I closed the thread. I did lock the thread at the end of that week, and I drew today using the random number generator. I decided to do that off camera because it would take time, and time is something that is precious to you, I'm sure. So the first giveaway was the stitch markers from the Wool Barn, and the winner of that, strangely enough, was Silwen. And I clicked on her and I thought, oh, that face looks familiar. And then I realised it was Nadia from Apsa Knitting Lutely, who I won a giveaway from a few weeks ago. So karma's a great thing. So that was the winner of the stitch markers. And the other giveaway was Louise Tilbrook's pattern, the Autumn Crocuses shawl. And there were 3 winners of that prize, because there are 3 patterns being sent out. And the first was Crafty Barb 395, also known as Barbara from Coventry. The second one was number 7, also B Rocker, and that's Brenda from Oregon. and number 6, which is Jamie Walcott, or also known as Jamie from Alabama. So, as I told everybody a couple of weeks ago, I won't inform you that you're a winner until at least a week's gone by, and if I don't hear from you, if you've not kept up with the episodes, then I'll ear burn you on Ravelry, and it'd be great to hear from you, particular Nadia, because I'll need your postal address to send you the stitch markers. And the other 3, it would just be nice to know that you've watched the episode and you haven't had the surprise spoiled for you. Funnily enough, I actually met Louise Tilbrook for the first time last week. She came up to Leicester for a meeting, and she got in touch and we went out for lunch, and she is just as lovely in person as she seems online, and it's always nice when that happens, when you don't have your illusions shattered by meeting people in real life. She's lovely, and we had a great time, and hopefully I'll meet her again if she comes up for another meeting at some point. So it was lovely to see you, Louise, and hope to do it again soon. So those are the main things I wanted to talk about in Stuff and Things. The other thing is Whip Crack Away, which is a knit along with Louise from Knit British and Nick from Yarns from the Plane, both who are British audio podcasts, and they are doing a knit along which is basically knitting up all your whips, getting them finished, and it's been really interesting doing that. And as a result of taking part, I have my first done and dusted. The first project in Done and Dusted is what I'm wearing. It was done as part of the Whip Crack Away Cal. It's not been hanging around too long. I actually started knitting it in January this year, but then I put it to one side when the weather started to get warmer because it's a chunky knit and I didn't want to have it sat in my lap while I was working on it. It's called the Shaped Capelet with Braided Cables by Erica Patberg, and it's from the Knitwear Premiere 2011 magazine. The project was on the cover of the magazine, and I really wanted to make it, but I didn't have the yarn in stash, and chunky yarn is usually a bit more expensive than if you're knitting it out of, say, a 4-ply, because the yardage is much smaller for 100 grams. So it sort of sat for a while, and then when the Darren Moore's yarn was released and there was a discount on it, I saw this colour, and it's almost exactly the same colour as the magazine sample was, and it was just, this is fate. I need to get this yarn. So it was a bit of a risk because it wasn't a yarn I'd ever sort of worked with. I'd never felt it, never really seen a sample knit up, and it's 50% merino, 50% acrylic. So it was a bit of a gamble, because the thing is with acrylic, you're not always quite sure how it's going to feel, but blended with the merino worked out well, and I'm really, really pleased with how it feels, especially after it was blocked, and it softened up beautifully, and it feels lovely against the skin, and it's really warm and cozy. Anyway, this capelet, I'm going to take it off so I can show you. I've been living in this thing since I finished it. It's just perfect for this time of year. It's kind of, let me see if I can, it's so difficult to see. There we go, you can see it's shaped. So across the back, it's wider. And the front, where the cables are much closer together. Now, the project is worked from a provisional cast on in the sort of the narrow cables. It goes outwards, doing increases between the cables, carries on sort of in parallel for a bit, and then narrows again, and then the cables are worked sort of close together for a bit, and then the two ends are grafted together. And I have to say, grafting was not fun. I don't like grafting in cables, but despite the having to start all over again problem that I had when I grafted it, it looks okay. I think you can just see, can you see there? Yeah, you can just see there. There's kind of a bend. It's a little bit tighter. I don't know if it comes up very well. The colour's a bit funny because it's so deeply red. Yeah, the first time I did it, it all was offset by a stitch or two, and it took me hours to do it, and I was so gutted, so depressed. I was like, oh, I don't want to do this again, but I did. And this time what I did was I counted off where the grafts needed to match up, and it wasn't too bad the second time round. I still wouldn't choose to graft cables again though, if at all possible. I'd like to avoid it. And it sort of sat for quite a long time, and really all I needed to do was pick up around the edges and knit the ribbing on. And the ribbing, I actually kind of squeezed it up a bit. I'd put in fewer stitches than I was supposed to for the size, basically to pull it up a bit tighter at the top, because it was, I think when I was blocking it, I was a bit over generous with the blocking, and it stretched out quite a lot. It's actually quite big for me now. So if I put the ribbing sort of closer with fewer stitches to pull it in tighter at the top to keep it sort of on my shoulders a bit more, and it sort of, I think it's worked quite well. You can sort of see it pulls in, and it's amazingly warm. It's I think the cables kind of create little pockets of air to warm up, and it's been so comforting to wear it as the weather's got a bit colder, because it sort of just wraps around your upper arms and your shoulders and your back, and it feels like you're wearing a lovely thick shawl, but you never have to worry about it falling off your shoulders. And you can sort of change it round, so you either have the sort of small bit at the front and the big bit at the back, or you can turn it around the other way if you're like me and you spend a lot of time lying back on the sofa. Actually having the longer bit across your front makes more sense than having it across your back and only having a small piece keeping your chest warm. So all in all, absolutely delighted with the project. It really makes me happy. And I've been wearing it a lot and can highly recommend it. I think you can download the knitwear magazines from the Interweave site, so you don't know, I don't know, it might actually be individual patterns might be available. If you just hang on a second, I'll see if it's possible to. No, I think it only comes from, yeah, you can only get it in the magazine, but you can download the magazine, I'm sure. But it's been wonderful, and I'm so pleased that the knit along sort of gave me the impetus to pick it up and just finish it, because it took a day of doing the ribbing to get it done, and I can't believe it sat there for so long just not being done. It's ridiculous. So that's my first project. My second project is actually one that I finished earlier. Now, this project is the Long and Winding Row cowl by Susan Ashcroft. And if you bear with me 1 second, I'll pull up my notes. It's actually, I'm going to put it on. It's so nice. This is actually hand spun yarn. It is knitted, be a bandit, out of Rambouillet, and this is the first time I've ever knit with Rambouillet, and I absolutely loved it. I loved spinning it, I love knitting with it, and I love wearing it. It's just such a lovely fibre. It's like Polworth with extra crimp. It's fabulous. It's the fibre was from, I can't remember. That's terrible. Someone good, I know that. This, can't believe it. I can't find it. It's in the show notes. I think it was Spun Right Round or somebody like that. And it's really lovely, beautifully prepared. And the colour was Dark Side of the Room, which made me smile. But I really enjoyed working with Rambouillet. It's a fibre you don't really see in the UK, so that was why I bought it from a US dyer, and absolutely without hesitation would grab it again if I got the opportunity. It's lovely stuff, and it's a 2-ply, and it was kind of done as a fractal spun yarn. Sort of split it lengthwise in half, and then split half of that again in half lengthwise, and then did the first one as one single ply and the second 2 as one single ply, one after the other, which means that the colours in the fibre are kind of offset, and you get sort of areas like this red bit, which is where the red bits have lined up, and then you get bits like this where the red and the blues have kind of created a staggered thing, and it kind of stripes but in a softer way, because it staggers the shifts of the colours, and I really like the effect, and I'll probably use it again quite often. It's because it's only 2-ply, it doesn't risk muddying up the colours, but it means you don't get these harsh stripes either. Anyway, going back to the project rather than the spin, the project, like I said, was The Long and Winding Row by Susan Ashcroft, and she is Stitch Nerd Designs, and I really like her patterns. She takes really nice, simple but interesting stitch patterns and creates a nice project from it. I think a lot of her stuff is designed to be used with hand spun yarn, which is why it works so well with something like this. It's just a really nice cowl. The stitch pattern is really simple, and it creates this kind of staggered spiral using slip stitches. Let me just take it off and I can try and show you a bit better. So it's done pulling the yarn across the front while slipping stitches, but it's staggered to create this spiral, and it gives it real sort of strength, which makes it a little bit sturdier for keeping you warm. It sort of, as you can see, it kind of stands up on its own, which is really good for keeping your ears and your chin warm when you're out and about. And I really love how it's worked out, and I can see myself knitting more of these cowls because I really like the stitch pattern. I kind of wish I had some more of the fibre, and then I could make a hat. but I'm really pleased with how that came out. It's a lovely, lovely project with nice handspun yarn that I'm really pleased with, paired up with a really nice pattern. I enjoyed spinning it, I enjoyed knitting it, and I'm sure I'm going to enjoy wearing it because it's just beautifully and squishy and soft. So that's item number 2. Item number 3 is my second attempt at a Ricky hat. Now let's see, not trimmed the ends yet. It's because it's not been blocked yet. So elegant putting on hats, isn't it, on camera? Anyway, this is the second attempt at a Ricky hat, and let's see, I can't, it's really hard to show you what it looks like while checking it out on the screen, but really pleased with it. It's knit in the yarn that I bought specifically for this particular item. It is Baby Longlegs Mesmerino in shades of grey, and I was so right about this yarn being right for this hat. It's perfect. It's got a nice, I think it's 3 or 4 ply. It's got a lovely tight ply. It's really plump, it's really soft. It's got great stitch definition, and the garter stitch really shows off the variegation. I do like the decreases on the crown of the hat, and that'll probably be a bit more defined when I block it out. It's a very simple pattern. The only sort of new thing that I learnt from it was the German twisted cast on, also known as the Old Norwegian cast on, and there was I looked it up on YouTube and found a video, and I'll try and do a link to that. And I also found it in a book of mine that I have in my crafting library, which was Cast On Bind Off. I can't remember the title off the top of my head or who wrote it, but I will link to it in the show notes because it's a really useful book. It's basically got loads of different cast-ons and bind-offs in separate categories, and I couldn't actually find it listed as a German twisted cast-on, but I could look up the stretchy cast-on and found it listed as Old Norwegian with a sort of little subcategory as also known as German twisted cast-on, and that had really good pictures and instructions, and that paired up with the YouTube video meant I could do it really easily. And it's actually a really easy, straightforward cast-on. It's kind of a modified long tail cast-on, but with an extra twist, and it makes for a really nice crisp edge, especially on garter stitch, but it's also really quite stretchy. But it doesn't pull it, it's not so stretchy it pulls out of shape, but it looks like a row of garter stitch. You get the sort of pearl ridge. It works really well, I really like it. So I'm really pleased that I changed what I was going to knit my Ricky hat out of. This yarn is lovely, and I'd quite happily knit a whole garment out of it if I had the money, but I don't. But it's lovely. It's very squishy, and Sarah was great to dye it up for me, and I do recommend her for custom dyes because she's really very reasonable at what she charges for her yarn and her dyeing, and her semi-solids are really second to none. They're beautiful, and I really love the way you can sort of see the tonal quality of this grey. It's really lovely, and it's nice and dense in the garter stitch, and it's going to keep my head lovely and warm this winter. So really pleased with the Ricky hat. And that is all I've got to share with you from Done and Dusted. So next up, I do believe it's nose to the grindstone. in Nose to the Grindstone, my main focus of energy has been the project for Whip Crack Away. Now, this has turned into a bit of a marathon knit, and this project is the Modern Quilt Wrap by Mags Candice, and that's a free pattern from Interweave. And if you go and have a look on my project notes, it'll take you through to the pattern and you'll be able to see how to get it for free. It's kind of one of these things where you have to sign up for the email and you get sent the like the booklet. There's like, it's not a physical booklet, it's like an e-booklet with several patterns. This is for shawls and scarves and things. And I started this project quite a long time ago. I think it was like 2011. Yeah, October 2011. And it's kind of sat for a long time because it drives me nuts. It's very, very tedious. And it's not the kind of tedious where you can just zone out and knit in circles or back and forth. No, this is the kind of tedious where you're constantly having to change your colours and pick up stitches and count. It's driving me batty. So what I decided to do with it was to concentrate on doing one block every day. And to keep me honest, I've been posting a photograph on Instagram of each block whenever I finished it, and that has kept me on track. In fact, it's kept me so on track, I now only have 6 blocks to do. And by block, I mean either one of these squares here, or 4 of these little squares. The project, let me see if I can show you it. Overall, it's huge. It's a really, really big wrap, and it's in Rowan Kid Silk Haze, and there are 8 different colourways, and they're all, I think it'll be only a skein of each colour, thank goodness, otherwise it would have bankrupted me. Not that I even bought that many of the skeins of yarn, because I inherited them from my mum's friend's daughter. But it's a really special project. It's something that would have cost an absolute fortune for me to make, and I never ever would have made it. I just wouldn't have done it if I hadn't got a big bag of Kid Silk Haze. And this thing is going to be beautiful when it's finished. It's warm and comforting and bright and colourful. It means I'll probably be able to wear it with just about any other accessory I choose because of all the different colours in it. They're not necessarily all the colours that I would have put together if given free rein. I just wanted to use up as much of the yarn as possible. I think I bought the lime green and the teal. So because I didn't have a lot of choice in the colours, some of them, I mean, like hot pink and moss doesn't really go that well next to each other. But I think when it's all, look at the back of this thing. Some of it's woven in, some of it's not. It's going to take probably about 3 days just to work it out whether they're all woven in or not. But it was so tempting to sort of say, oh, that's plenty big enough. That's huge. I don't need to do another 6 blocks. But I've come so far. I really need to finish it off. Really need to do it. And I think it's going to be absolutely beautiful. I mean, how warm am I going to be with this thing around my neck? So cosy. So cosy. And I think when it is wrapped around my neck, you won't sort of see any kind of oddness with the colours that are next to each other. I mean, you just don't really notice it because it's all kind of mashed together. So I think it'll be okay. But I've been, like I say, I've been posting a picture on Instagram and Twitter and my Facebook page every day when I finish my block. Some of the block photos are not great because they were taken after the sun had gone down. But even when I was feeling quite ill, I managed to get my block finished and the photo taken. And people have been so lovely on Instagram and Twitter and things, sort of cheering from the sidelines and cheering me on to help keep me motivated, because it's been hard to keep motivated because it is a tedious pattern, and I will warn you of that. If you decide you want to make this pattern, be warned, it will drive you insane. I mean, I've only really done the second half of this shawl in this attempt. The other half had kind of been done in the sort of, I think I attempted to do it twice before, and it took 2 attempts before I started tearing my hair out and stopped for quite a while. And pulling it out, it's been a nightmare, but it's been rewarding as well, because I think when this is done, I'll wear it a lot, and I'll wear it for years. It's funny. I was listening to Prairie Girls Knit and Spin the other day, and their topic of debate was production versus product versus process knitting. And I would say normally I'm a process knitter. I enjoy the act of knitting, and I choose my projects to enjoy knitting it. Either it's because it's a beautiful yarn that I want to knit with, or it's a technique I really enjoy, or I find it's a challenge, and it's kind of got to encourage me, you know, draw me in some way to actually enjoy the process of knitting it. But this is very much a product knitting project. I am knitting it completely for this end product, and that's kind of unusual for me. Though having said that, the capelet was a product project. So I think as time has gone by and I've sort of got more techniques under my belt, and I've become less sort of focused on learning new skills and new techniques, I've become a little bit more open to knitting a project because I really want the result of it, because I want the product. So I thought it was quite interesting that I was listening to that debate when this is so absolutely something I'm hating knitting, but I'm carrying on with it because I really, really want the product. So hopefully, given that I've only got 6 more blocks to do, by the next episode, all the knitting will be finished. Whether all the ends have been woven in or not, or whether it's been blocked or not, is a whole other story. So that's the first thing. In fact, the main thing that's kept me occupied. The next thing on my list of things that I wanted to talk about was the baby blankets that I was working on. And this has kind of been, I'm enjoying knitting it. It's fun knit. However, it does require a little bit of attention. So again, it's been something that I've not been focusing on because I've not been feeling great. But I knew it needed to, you know, really crack on with it, because the baby's being born in sort of early 2015. I kind of want to get it done and dusted well before Christmas, because I'll have Christmas projects to work on, and I really have to start thinking about that. Not even considered what I'm going to do for Christmas knitting. Do I have to go Christmas knitting? Don't have to, but if people sort of say they'd like it. I don't want to say no to somebody who wants knitting. You see what I mean? It's like, you know, it means they appreciate what I'm doing, that they want it. And particularly the kids. If the kids want toys, I'm definitely going to be knitting them, even if it drives me insane, all those little bits. Anyway, this is how far I've got. I originally was going to do 5 green stripes, but I was getting really close to the end of the first green skein. So I decided that I would just do 4. It's not as... I prefer odd numbers to look balanced. I think they just look more balanced, but I don't think anyone's going to be looking at how many stripes on this baby blanket when it's wrapped around a cute baby. I think it's going to, you know, it's going to play second fiddle. But I am enjoying it, apart from the fact I'm just in this massive middle section, which is all in white, and it's become a little bit more boring. So I've kind of been following the same idea as the wrap, which is doing a bit every day. It's kind of steals from the idea of Kirby Werby. When she's been on the Suburban Stitcher podcast, she's talked about quota knitting, where when she's got to get something done by a specific date, she will sit down and she will do a certain amount of rows every day in order to get it done by a target date. And I've kind of been following that same logic, where I've done my square on my modern quilt wrap, and then I've done, you know, I've tried to do at least half an hour on the baby blanket, and it seems to be paying off because it's growing. It's growing. I think what I'll try and do is put a little lockable stitch marker. There's one already in there, but that's to mark off where I changed a ball of white yarn over, so I can measure when I need to start with my chevrons at the other end again. But I'll get a fancy lockable stitch marker, or a bright one, so you'll be able to see how much I've done in between episodes, and hopefully that'll keep me motivated as much as doing a picture on Instagram every day has done with the blocks on my wrap. So it is going, it is sort of trucking along, but it's not a particularly exciting thing to look at. Again, that project was the, what was it? It was the Walt painted chevron baby blanket, and that was by Danielle Romanetti, and I think that's a free pattern. And it is nice and fun. I think it'd probably be more fun if I used more colours, but I think it will look nice with just the white and the green. So that's that one talked about. So next up on my list, in my extensive show notes that I prepared before I got sick, is something you've not seen. In fact, what I've got, actually no, that's not true. I don't know if I have shown you these. This is kind of a half finished object, as well as a nose to the grindstone, and that's my first sock. It's all sort of weird at the heel. There we go, that's a bit better, and it's a fish lips kiss heel. You can see it's done with nice neat short rows to get this nicely shaped heel, and it hugs the ball of my heel very nicely. It's the best heel I found for me and my foot. I know that some people don't get on with it, but for my foot it works well, and it's also something I can do without looking at, so that's why I'm sticking with it. It means all I need to do at the beginning of the project is work on the toe bit. And you can see my toes are shaped, so there are more increases on one side than there are on the other, and that is because I've got quite square toes, and so they're quite wide, and they slope. That is kind of straight on one side because I've got a long, big, straight, big toe, and then it sort of slopes away from that, so it's kind of like that shape. And you can see it's not, the increases are not directly down the centre of the edge of my foot. They're set in by 3 stitches on both sides. And that means when you put the sock on your foot, the increase ridges are not on the side that rubs up against the shoe. And it looks really nice and neat. I really like it. It was something I picked up when I was developing my vanilla sock pattern. I think it was from Bigfoot Knits. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But it was that book really helped me develop my sock pattern, my default sock pattern. And then I added in the Fish Lips Kiss heel, and that fitted my heel much better than the heel I developed with that book. But the yarn, I should have said this earlier, this is a Regia yarn. It's from the Design Line range, and let's see if I can find a label. Yeah, it's the Design Line ombre stripe. With calf facet. It's really hard. There we go. It's quite difficult to get it to show because I think it's a set focus on this camera. And what's the colourway? 04484. And this Regia is definitely my go-to workhorse yarn. I think it's guaranteed for 10 years. Yes, 10-year guarantee, and it's machine washable. And I've got some socks knit in Regia. They were the first pair I ever knit, and that was, I don't know, five years ago, and they've hardly shown anywhere at all. So though it's not as soft as the Indie Dyer's Merino, it's soft and it does the job, and you can machine wash it, and it will stand up to pretty much all you can throw at it. So, and it's reasonably priced. So I'll probably always continue to knit with Regia sock yarn as well as with the Indie dyed socks, simply because it's nice to have a mixture of socks that can be machine washed as well as ones that I hand wash. I've got quite a good collection of socks now, and there's probably a third can be washed in the machine, and the other 2/3 are hand washable. So I kind of wanted to catch up with some of the machine washed ones, because I do still have probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 sort of machine washable sock yarns in my stash that need to be knitted up. So I'm trying to get around to those, as well as treating myself and knitting with the really nice hand-dyed Indie sock yarn as well. So that's kind of a half-finished work in progress. Can't talk. The next thing, God, I'm working on so much, simply because when I feel a bit ill, I kind of look for stuff that I can work on without really thinking about. And I got to the end of that sock and I knew that I needed to concentrate on starting the toe. So I didn't want to do that because my brain just wasn't there. So what I did was I cast on this project. And this is a shawl called Red Katana, and it's knit out of Malabrigo Arroyo, and it's kind of like I don't know what this shape's called. It goes, it's long out like that, it goes along like that, and then it goes in at the top like that. So it's wide and then narrow at the ends. And in fact, what I should do is show you a picture. The pattern's by Svetlana Volkova, and I just really liked this picture. There we go. I think it's a really, really interesting shape. I really like stripes, really like chevrons, really like Malabrigo. Couldn't really go wrong really with this pattern. There've been about 50 people who've knit this project so far, and the pattern was written for Arroyo, and it came up on the recommended projects on Ravelry for me when the pattern was first released, which was, when was it first released? In August. And I really liked it straight away and knew I wanted to knit it, and even knew I wanted to knit it out of the Malabrigo. And a little while ago decided to treat myself to the yarn, and the colours I chose were Natural and VAA, which is VAA, yeah, VAA, and that's that one. And it's really lovely blues, deep blues and greens. In some lights it's almost black. Yeah, that's kind of what you would see from across the room. You wouldn't see the details of the blues and the greens that you see there, even though that is what the colour is made of. And the other one's the natural. I just thought they looked really nice together. So I started working on that and not got very far because I was distracted again. I was distracted by a project also knit out of Malabrigo. Now, this project is a poncho called Manto, and I can't believe it, I can't find the project. This is what happens when you try and have your notes on an iPad. You think you've got stuff open, but you haven't at all. Anyway, it's Manto, a knitter's poncho by Shannon Squire, and I love Malabrigo worsted, and I never thought I'd ever really be able to justify buying enough yarn to do a garment. But there was a discount on tangled yarn for Malabrigo worsted in certain colourways, and I looked through the colourways and found one that I kind of liked, that I thought was interesting and had a reasonable amount of skeins left. In fact, there were 5 skeins left, and I did some hunting around in my favourites on Ravelry and found this particular pattern, and it just seemed to work for me because it was I'd just finished the capelet and realised how much I was wearing it and how much I liked wearing it, and decided that it would be nice to have something similar, just sort of throw over your shoulders, but still allows you a certain degree of temperature control because it's not wrapped around your arms and tight to your body. You can kind of move it aside to sort of let air in or out, kind of thing. And I thought a poncho would be nice, and to be honest, I've seen a lot of ponchos in the shops, and it kind of gave me the justification to buy the yarn. Anyway, the yarn I got was Malabrigo worsted in the SFO Sky colourway, which is kind of this black and white and almost a kind of very soft lavender, and it's very, very muted grey lavender colour. I think it kind of looks like winter camo gear. That's what I think it looks like. What I've done is the sort of top section, which is this, and it's a slip stitch section, and you knit that flat and then you join it in the round, and once it's blocked it kind of sits sideways open across the front. It's kind of hard to illustrate. Then once that's joined in the round, you've got this little ribbed section which sort of pulls in at the neck and gives it a sort of fold, and then it goes on to a raglan for the shoulders, and it goes out quite sharply, and then it gets to a certain sort of distance from the neck, and then it sort of eases in the speed of change. And I think there's another sort of slip stitch pattern. I think they called it a modified linen stitch at the bottom, and I just really like the way it looks. It's got a really nice shape to it. The way it sits, it's sort of kind of hip length, and because it's straight along the back and across the front, it means that you don't sit on it and throttle yourself, and I like that in a garment, that you don't throttle yourself. So let me show you a picture of what it looks like, which is going to be slightly better. Oh no, come back. There we go. I think it looks really stylish, and you can kind of button up the neck, and because it's got this linen stitch, it's a little bit more sturdy than if it was just stocking stitch, and I think that'll mean it can kind of stand up a bit more when it's buttoned and just give you a bit of extra warmth around your neck. And I just think it's a really stylish pattern, and I liked it as soon as I saw it, and it's, like I say, it's been in my favourites a little while, and I am loving knitting this. It's on big needles. I think it's written for 6.5 mils, and I've done it on 6mm needles because I've got a really loose gauge. That's, by the way, is why I never really bother telling people what needles I'm using, because my gauge usually bears no resemblance at all to what the pattern's written for. But like I say, they're 6mm needles, or US size 10s, so it's going really quickly, because there's not any complex shaping, it's pretty mindless, and it was perfect when I was feeling kind of sick. But because I love knitting with Malabrigo worsted so much, even though it's mindless, I've been picking it up whenever I can, because it's just such a pleasure to knit with this. So when I got past the neck, I started alternating skeins every 2 rows, and what I did was I sort of twisted the yarn that was sort of dangling around the working yarn in between the exchange rows, so it was always carried up sort of behind the working yarn, which means that it kept everything sort of neat and tidy, and you can't really see. In fact, see if I can show you at the back. Where am I? Where the stitch marker is where the yarn is carried up the back, and you really can't see it at all. And in fact, it's pretty. There's no gaps, nothing, and it's really neat on the back. You can just see it on the back here. Oops, there we go. You just see it here. But it's really neat and tidy, and there's no sort of gap at all, and it's working really well. In fact, that was a technique that I learnt when I was knitting a Stephen West pattern, and it was done in intarsia, and he sort of explained how to sort of loop the edges around each other in order to keep it nice and neat, and that was how he did it. And if it works in intarsia, it's definitely going to work in switching yarns around, in order to prevent pooling, and also to sort of soften any transitions in the different skeins of yarn, because even though they're all from the same dye lot, with things like Malabrigo worsted, which are kettle dyed, there's no guarantee that there won't be a variation in the different skeins of yarn. So that's what I've been doing with that, and I am really, really enjoying that pattern. It's great fun, and I think it's going to be something that I'll wear an awful lot, especially after wearing the capelet, which is in a chunky yarn, and that's in an Aran yarn. So hopefully I'll get a lot of wear out of that by the end of the winter. So I want to get on with getting that finished. And finally, in Nose to the Grindstone, you'll be pleased to hear this is finally, I've been working on a spinning project, and it's not any spinning project that you've seen so far. This is 80% merino and 20% tussar silk from the Unwind Yarn Company, and it's in a one-of-a-kind colourway. So sadly you can't get any of this stuff because it's lovely. It's really gorgeous, sort of rich plums and a bit of gold and kind of grey purple. It's really, really nice, and it's nice and soft, and it's easy to draft, and I'm really enjoying it. I decided I wanted to do something different from the projects I was working on before, because I got this in the post. This is a Neil brand spindle, and I have never had an opportunity to buy a Neil brand spindle before this one, and as soon as I saw it was in the Etsy store, I snapped it up, and I cannot believe how good this spindle is. It's in ivory, the shaft is in ivory wood, and the whirl is in black palm, and I love it. It looks like it's got kind of leopard spots on it. It's fab, so nice. And this is different from the other ones I've ever spun with. It's got this little brass tip, and it makes for a lovely, lovely smooth spin. That, and the fact it's an incredibly well balanced spindle, and it's a nice long shaft the way I like. It's 11¼ inches, which is about 28ish centimeters. So it's a good size spindle, so you can get quite a lot on the shaft, and it's a comfortable sort of tiny tip, which means that you don't have to put an awful lot of effort into getting a decent spin off it. And I've enjoyed spinning on this tremendously. I'm spinning worsted. I've already got one plying ball worth of singles. I don't know if you can see how well it's showing, how thick I've done the plies, but that's what I've got so far, and that's about half of the yarn, and I've got about 1/4 on here, and I think I should quite easily fit the other 1/4 on it. And spinning worsted, it's not as fast as spinning long draw, but it's nice to do it sometimes. And because I'm sort of doing it a reasonably thick ply, the fact I'm going to do it as a 2-ply will mean it's a reasonable gauge weight of yarn, and hopefully maybe enough to knit some mitts or something. You can barely tell there's any silk in it. It's funny because it just feels really soft. You can't sort of see any chunks of silk in it. It's just very, very sort of thoroughly blended with the merino. And the colour's lovely and the preparation's gorgeous, and you can't really go wrong with Unwind. Dana does some beautiful work, and it's been lovely to get hold of her fibre, and especially a one-of-a-kind colourway. But the spindle has been an absolute joy to spin with, and I'm delighted to have scored it, because normally Neil Brand is a bit like Spanish Peacock, and because he's in the US, he posts an update, usually when I'm asleep in the middle of the night, and by the time I wake up and find the update, it's all sold out. And I was absolutely flabbergasted when I saw this one still in stock in the morning, and I kind of just went for it. I just didn't even think about whether I could afford it or not. I thought, I've got to have it. I need to know whether they're as good as everyone says they are. And I can absolutely confirm that, yes, they are as good as everyone says they are. Neil Brand supported spindles are beautiful, and I wouldn't hesitate to get another one. It's just been so much fun to work with. I've really enjoyed it. And I can't wait to finish this project off and get the resulting yarn to knit with as well. So I think I've come to the end of Done and Dusted. And next up, this is kind of blended a bit, splashed out, because my spindle should have been in splashed out, but it kind of was showing the spinning off as well. So yeah, next up is splashed out. In splashed out, the main thing I had to talk about was the Neil Brand, but I managed to finally get hold of a skein of yarn I bought for about 8 weeks ago that kind of got lost in the post, and it was from the final sale of hand-dyed yarn from Fiberspates. Now, if you've visited my blog, you've listened to my podcast, you've watched the video podcast, you know that I like Fiberspates a lot. And I was really sad to hear that Jenny was going to be concentrating on the hand-dyed side of her business, and was going to be working more on the wholesale side of things, the stuff that was being produced in factories. I love the stuff that you can get from the factories that she has made, the scrumptious, the vivacious, and I think there's a gleam. I've not tried that yet. And there's cumulus as well now. And I kind of wanted to get kind of a token, a reminder of the hand-dyed side of things. And I went and had a look at the update, and in there was something that I thought was very beautiful. And it's really not that bright. Yeah, that might be it. It's slightly darker than that. But it is a really nice bright blue with a hint of purple. And the colourway is called Lavender Sea, which I think is very appropriate and very accurately named. And it is a 4-ply in pure silk, and there are 400 metres per 100 grams, and that's what I've got, is 100 grams, and it's beautiful. And I was so sad when it seemed to get lost in the post, and it just vanished. It never appeared. And in the interim, I'm going to move on here into online community. It's this kind of blurring between splashed out and online community now, because in the interim, while I was waiting for this maybe to turn up one day, I finished my scrumptious stole, and I got contacted by Green Triangle Girl, and she said, you do know that you're the first person to finish this particular garment from the Scrumptious Collection Volume 3. And I went, am I? And she said, yes, you are. I said, did you know there was a knit along for this? And I went, no, I didn't. Or if I did, I forgot. And what it was when the book was first brought out at the beginning of the year, when I reviewed the copy on the blog, Jenny posted in the Fiberspace group on Ravelry that the first person to post in that thread with a photograph of a finished project from that book knit in scrumptious yarns would receive the scrumptious yarn in the colour of their choice in order to make another project from the book. So I won enough scrumptious yarn to make another project from that book. And I couldn't believe it, because I've never ever had enough of Fiberspace yarn to make a garment. I mean, just a skein of lace weight is a bit of a splashing out for me. But Jenny got in touch and I said what I really would like to do was knit the Rose Moran cardigan. And that is knit in the 4-ply sport. So I got sent 5 skeins of Fiberspace scrumptious 4-ply sport in the slate colourway, and I could not believe it when they said that I'd won this, because I didn't knit that project with the intention of doing it to win anything else. I just desperately wanted that stole in that yarn, and I can't believe that I've got 5 skeins of this. And I chose the slate colourway because it's a really nice neutral colour, and the grey should go with absolutely everything I've got. It will go with any colour. It's a really good neutral, and it's so beautiful. I love this yarn so much. It's so soft and bouncy. It's let me see, it is, it'll tell me on the label, won't it? 45% silk and 55% superwash merino, and there's 365 meters or 399 yards in 100 grams, which is what this is. And it's so nice. It's a beautiful, beautiful yarn. And I have knit with this before. I knit a shawlette in it, and I really enjoyed it. So the Rose Moran cardigan is a lace cardigan in kind of a rounded neck style, and it finishes on the high hip. And it's not something I would normally go for. The style isn't something that I would think I could wear and it would look flattering on me. But I kind of looked at a lot of different garments on Ravelry and in different shops, and looked at different sort of silhouettes and shapes on different body types. And I looked at it and I thought, you know what? I think I can make that work. And I decided that I was going to take a gamble and I was going to knit the Rose Moran cardigan. And that's how I decided that was the yarn I was going to request. And the colourway was out of stock for a while. And then when it came back in, Jenny contacted me to let me know that this had been returned to her as the sender because it had not been collected. I hadn't received a card to tell me it needed to be collected, and I'm quite cross about that. But luckily, Jenny was able to fit it in with the other yarn and not pay any extra post. So I was really pleased about that, to actually get this yarn, and after thinking it was lost forever in the depths of Royal Mail distribution centre somewhere, and actually have this beautiful, beautiful yarn, and hopefully knit some sort of shawl or something out of it. It's a beautiful colour, and I think it'll work really well with me. So it's definitely going to be for me, this one. Definitely a keeper. And can't wait to knit this. It probably won't be until the spring, because it's very much a spring summer cardigan because it's lacy. But I just couldn't believe the price. I just could not believe it. I was absolutely flabbergasted when I found out. It's just such a wonderful, wonderful surprise. It's an incredibly generous price. To do that for each of the patterns in the book is phenomenal. Incredibly generous. And off the back of that, I won another prize. And this prize was from Skein Yarns. There we go. Isn't that a great bag? It's massive. It's absolutely huge. Look how big it is. It's kind of... I could fit huge projects in this. And the project bag was a real surprise. The thing that I thought I was getting was this. Now, this is a skein of Slinky in the pixelated colourway. And Slinky is 80% superwash merino, 10% cashmere and 10% nylon. And the pixelated colourway is one of her newer ones, which is from her scatter dye. And I love the colours. It's sort of pinks and purples and greens and grey and hints of yellow. I mean, it's just got fabulous ranges of colours in it. It's just gorgeous. And it's going to knit up beautifully. I mean, it's one of my favourite bases is MCN. Merino, cashmere, nylon. I just think it's a really nice blend of fibres. It gives you the sort of soft bounciness of the merino. The nylon gives it sturdiness, and the cashmere gives it a sense of luxury and decadence. It's a wonderful yarn, and it again was a generous prize from, I think it was a knit along with Skein Yarn and her podcast. And if you've not seen Skein Yarn podcast, I recommend it. It's with the dyer who makes Skein Yarn, and she is in Australia, and she talks an awful lot about dyeing, and she shared some videos of techniques, and she talks about, you know, the way her business is structured. I mean, she gives away an awful lot of really involved and in-depth information. She's very generous with the knowledge that she makes available to you, and I really do recommend you go and have a look. It's a good fun podcast. I really enjoy it, and this yarn is just wonderful. So the prize was to have a skein, any skein of yarn dyed up in the colourway of your choice, and this just really jumped out at me because I really wanted the MCN base, and I really like MCN with a high twist. It just gives it that little bit of extra strength, and the pixelated colourway just jumped out and grabbed me, and it's a wonderful prize for me because I love skein yarns, but I normally can't really afford them because obviously it's coming from Australia, and so if I buy direct from the dyer, I have to pay customs charges and shipping, and if I buy from a retailer in the UK, I have to pay higher price because they have to cover their customs charges and shipping. So it's not really economical for me to buy very often. In fact, I've only bought it once. But to actually have a skein of the yarn as my very own is rather wonderful. And I have no idea what I'm going to knit with it, but it'll probably be a shawl. But if you've not come across this hand dyer before, I really recommend her because her work is beautiful, and her semi-solids and tonals are beautiful as well. And she's recently brought out a new range of bases, which is I think it's an Australian yarn range, and they've been done a lot in new solids and semi-solid colours. So there's like a really big range of solids and semi-solids now that you can like buy garments worth of, and yeah, I really recommend you go and have a look at yarn, check out her podcast too. So that, I think, oh no, there is something else I forgot. forgot to talk about Pod Retreat. Pod Retreat. That is a retreat, little mini holiday going on in Chester in February, and it runs from the 18th to the 22nd of February, and it's being organised by Nick from Yarns from the Plain. And they did a pod retreat earlier in this year, in this same place, and I think there's going to be 4 of us podcasters are going to be there, and there's not going to be a huge quantity of people. It's got limited room. I think there are still a couple of spaces that are available, and it's kind of been done really sort of paring back the costs as much as possible. I think it's £80 to share an ensuite room, or £160 to get it to yourself. And there are no sort of trips organised or anything. The last one they had trips organised, but everyone just had more fun hanging out at the house and chatting and knitting and stuff. And that's kind of what swung me into thinking I can do this, because normally I wouldn't dare go away on my own without either my partner or a close friend or other family member, because I really do need a lot of help with things like being lifted. I can't really cook. I can't really go very far, so I might have, take the wheelchair. So it's always a bit, I want to be with people that I don't feel hesitant about asking for help with. And it's not easy for anybody who's got a disability to ask for help. It is a difficult thing. And I don't know any of the people going. I've never met any of them. And that's kind of scary. And originally I was thinking, I don't think I can do it, because the last time when the original pod retreat was organised, I looked at it and there were no direct trains from Leicester to Chester. And I thought, I'll look again and see if it's a different timetable. And again, there were no direct trains. However, there was a single change train, and I could do a change at Nuneaton, which isn't that far away. It's probably about half an hour, 40 minutes drive away. And my other half said, I'll drive you to Nuneaton and put you on the train, and that means you won't have to do any changes. And that's the main worry for me, is doing changes on the train. It means, because I'd have to manhandle stuff on and off and get it across to another platform and get it all back on again and then get off at the other end. It's just really physical, and it's really hard to rely on Network Rail staff to come and help. In fact, I've heard many tales of when people have been stuck on trains and not been able to get off because the member of staff hasn't turned up to help them. And I'm not completely wheelchair bound. However, it still scares me that I won't be able to get my wheelchair and my baggage off the train. So I was a bit nervous about that. So knowing that I can be put on the train at Nuneaton by my other half, and I'll be able to get myself off at the other end no matter what, I'm sure. It might hurt me, might damage me, but I can get myself off the train. And the house where we're staying isn't that far away, and I was able to talk to Nick, who's organising it, because it's in the same house it was in last time, and she was able to tell me about the layout, how it was all set up, and she was able to link photos of what the sofas and the chairs and everything looked like. And I looked at it and I thought, you know what, I think I can do this. I think, especially because there is a bedroom on the ground floor, and Nick says she'll make sure I'm in there. So, and it's an ensuite bedroom as well, which means I don't have to get up and downstairs if I'm feeling ropey. I can just lie on the bed and then get to the bathroom if need be. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to sign up for this. I'm going to go on holiday on my own with a bunch of people I've never met before. It's kind of scary, but I do feel like I know the other podcasters pretty well, because we do talk to each other on Twitter and things, and we listen and watch each other's podcasts, and I think we've all got to know each other reasonably well. So I'm really excited about meeting them. I think it's Joe from the Shiny Bees podcast, and Nick, obviously, from Yarns on the Plane, Louise from Knit British, and me. So 4 podcasters. And I think the rest of the people who are coming are podcast listeners. So if you are interested in coming and joining us, hanging out in a big old house in Chester for a long weekend, get in touch with Nick and sign up, because I think it's going to be fun. The prices I quoted are just for the rooms. They're not for the food. You'll need to chip in for the food as well. But that'll be worked out nearer the time. But I think it's going to be really good fun. Really excited about it, as well as nervous. But, you know, I think it'll be really good. And obviously, as we get nearer the time, I'll probably talk to you a bit more about it. And I think, that is absolutely everything. So thank you for joining me again. I do apologise for having a big gap in between episodes, but that's probably going to be a frequent problem. I hope you are well and you enjoy the rest of your week and you enjoy what you're crafting, and come over to the Ravelry group, come say hi, come and chat, come and share with us what you've been working on, what you've finished, come and talk about any questions you have that you'd like me to talk about in the podcast, and hopefully I'll see you again soon. Bye.